For generations, the Rio Grande Valley has lived under the shadow of the storm. 1967, Hurricane Beulah, up to 30 inches of rain. Fields washed away, homes crushed, 115 tornadoes tearing the valley apart. 1980, Hurricane Allen, over 20 inches of rainfall. Winds howled at 120 miles per hour, flattening crops and swallowing towns whole. 1999, Hurricane Brett, 12 inches of relentless rain. Rivers burst their banks, towns drowned overnight. 2008, Hurricane Dolly, 15 inches in Harlan-Jenny. Power grids collapsed, streets became rivers, homes vanished beneath the flood. 2010, Hurricane Alex, over 8 inches in Hidalgo County. Waters surged, levees strained, the Rio Grande creeping higher by the hour. 2018, the June floods, no hurricane. 18 inches of rain swallowed Weslaco and Mercedes. Thousands of homes underwater, families stranded in rising water. 2019, Hurricane Barry's outer bands. 8 inches of rain, proof that storms don't have to hit us directly to leave devastation behind. 2020, Hurricane Hannah. 18 inches of rainfall turned neighborhoods into lakes, power lines into lifelines. 2021, summer thunderstorms. 10 inches of rain near Brownsville. No warning, no name, just water rising in the dead of night. 2022, another flood. Streets submerged again. Families forced to flee as history repeated itself. 2023, Tropical Storm Harold. 6 inches of heavy rain on already saturated ground, pushing communities closer to the brink. And then, 2025. It started like any other storm. The forecast, light rain, 2 inches at most, but the storm had other plans. It formed over the Pacific, crept behind the Sierra Madre Oriental, and grew unseen until it was too late. In just 36 hours, the Rio Grande Valley took on half a year's worth of rain. The Arroyo, Colorado swelled to 54 feet. Streets turned to rivers. Families fled with minutes to spare. 6 lives were lost, thousands trapped. And this wasn't even a hurricane. It was a warning. Because if this had been another Hurricane Beulah, it wouldn't have been 6 lives. It would have been 100,000. 1 in 14 people in the Rio Grande Valley. Gone. And we know it's coming. Not if, when. The next storm will not come quietly. It will tear through with winds, hail, and tornadoes stronger than we've ever seen. It won't bring inches of rain. It will bring feet. Not half a year's worth in 36 hours, but 2 years' worth in 48. And even after the skies clear, the nightmare will continue. As cities scramble to pump water from flooded neighborhoods, they'll send it into places that have never flooded before. Days later, homes once safe will drown under rising waters. The efforts to save some will sacrifice others. And beneath the surface, something worse waits. In the toxic, stagnant floodwaters, flesh-eating bacteria Vibrio vulnificus thrives. We've seen it already. A local man, Nate, now fights for his life, enduring emergency surgeries just to survive. Survive the flood, and you still face an invisible killer. Without action, we aren't preparing for survival. We are preparing for extinction. This isn't just the Rio Grande Valley's fate. This is America's future. This is what happens before we drowned.
In the 1900s, right, we have this magic valley and fertile soil that the reason why it's fertile is because over millions of years, the Rio Grande River used to flood. And by definition, the RGV is in a floodplain. A floodplain, by definition, is an overflow that takes on discharge when the Rio Grande River floods. So during the drought, these farmers were planting these farms and crops were thriving, but then a flood would hit and their crops would die. So it happened repeatedly, and in the mid-1950s and the mid-1900s and 1950s, our state representatives, right, the counterparts of our current leaders at the time, listened to the flood victims, which were mainly agricultural, economy and farmers, and they put together a plan, engineering marvel type plan to address the flooding at the time, which consisted of the Falcon Dam, the Amistad Dam, and the creation of the IBWC, which is the International Boundary Water Commission, to address this, again, at a regional level. And then, voila, right? After some politicking, creating these entities, building the dams, problem solved for the agricultural economy, for the farmers at the time. Great. But now as we fast forward and this urban sprawl starts happening, the farmers start selling their land, their kids and their grandchildren start selling the land because they don't want to farm like grandpa did. They want to make money and make subdivisions. So now you have this commercial parking lots, Costco's, Walmart's, with all of this impervious cover. Impervious means lands and characteristics where water can soak into the ground versus impervious like asphalt, concrete, roofs, sidewalks, driveways, where water will run off tenfold instead of soaking into the ground. So now you're changing the characteristics of the actual land use, and whenever you do that, if you don't plan properly, it increases tenfold, which is why we do what is called pre-development and post-development calculations to make sure that we account for that. The thing is, the ordinance across the valley were not set in place. Waivers and variances were given by politicians because developers want to make money. Again, this is a money problem. The greed has caused our flood crisis, in my opinion. But because this problem is 100 years in the making of negligence and not addressing drainage upgrades and mitigation at a regional level, that has caused this problem to where now any little driveway or stripes that goes up, is going to cause a direct flood for the neighbors. So now everybody just thinks, just build high. No, all you're doing is you're just flooding your neighbor now at that point, and now you're just building an island for yourself when it does flood. You can't get in and out of your home. That is not the solution. When the rain started coming, right, from Rio Hondo, San Benito area and the outskirts, all the way up the valley west towards McAllen, people experienced flooding like never before. This is a catastrophic flood that had never happened before. I've been warning people that this would happen, and I'm going to say this now, it will happen again. Water started rising. This urban sprawl created this mess that we're in right now, where all this water just, before all this development, would soak into the ground in earthen ditches, right? We changed, I talked about earlier how we changed the characteristics of the land. So now any concrete pipe, any concrete parking lot, now water shoots straight to these ditches that are under-designed because they were designed for agricultural purposes, because they were farms before and they weren't meant to take urban runoff. Now, all of this water from these commercial developments and from the expressway, from TxDOT's improvements of drainage, which all they did was put it into concrete pipe. Now water shoots to these drain ditches, these main drain ditches, which you can kind of consider like a highway system for water. And so all this water gets into these drain ditches, inundating them. And then now the neighborhoods can't drain into. So that's why the neighborhoods are backing up, because by the time the neighborhoods are trying to get into that ditch behind their neighborhood, they're already filled up from all the other impervious developments that lack any kind of detention or drainage ordinance that was put in place.
The elevation drop in the valley from the western parts of the valley to us is about 1 foot per mile. That's how much elevation changes, from, let's say, like the Mission area to the Laguna Madre, okay? We live in a delta. We live in the Rio Grande Delta, kind of like the Mississippi Delta. When you have major rain events, water rises. When we have major rain events, when folks most folks, that can afford it, and businesses protect themselves by building in higher elevations. And you'll see that in many places. And that is helpful. The challenges that we have is that if you have a person here that's 3 feet underwater or 4, and they have a medical issue or they are a dialysis patient, you got to get them to dialysis center. An ambulance won't go in there. This morning at our meeting, EOC has a meeting every day for updates. One of the things that I brought up, and I'll probably get into trouble for doing it, but that's okay, because I've been in trouble before and I want to continue being in trouble, is I asked the National Weather Service, when we were listening to the reports from the National Weather Service, which is a group from the NOAA group, National Oceanic Atmospheric Studies, we were told in Cameron County that we could expect maybe 2 inches of rain, that the bulk of this was going to be in the Corpus Christi area and move westernly from us, where they would get more rain. And us, we were kind of like in a cone that was out of the area, out of the cycle, out of their predictability zone. And lo and behold, we end up in the middle of all of it with 20 inches of rain in 36 hours. How can your sophisticated instrumentation of the National Weather Service, not be able to do better predictability than that?
If we have another storm like this, there will be people that die again, because people don't know how, they think that they can go through flood waters, but little do they know that during a flood, by definition, a flood is an engineering failure. And with that engineering failure, inevitably is going to cause the sanitary sewer system to flood as well, because now you inundate all the pump systems. Just look at the news. The TCEQ, Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, is doing an investigation right now into Harlingen Waterworks because partial untreated discharge was thrown into the Arroyo, Colorado. And now it's affecting our wildlife, our water quality. So they're doing a massive investigation in Harlingen and in Alamo because of untreated sewage water that was released during this flood.
And yes, even now, the Arroyo, Colorado remains officially listed as an impaired water body. The latest 303D report from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality confirms what we feared. This river is still too polluted to meet basic water quality standards. Year after year, the flow depends on wastewater discharges just to stay alive. The danger isn't over, it's ongoing. The Arroyo remains a toxic artery, carrying contamination straight into our communities. And if the floods come again, it will drag all of it through our homes, our streets, and our lives.
People are going to the hospital right now from Green Valley Farms area in San Benito because this flesh-eating bacteria, there's E. coli in here because it's untreated sewage. So all of this flood water, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is basically septic system water that you're walking in. So don't go splashing around in it, because that stuff gets in your mouth, you're gonna get sick. You're gonna get E. coli. E. coli causes really, really bad issues with your immune system and with your body, and so it's just really gross sewage water.
Many of these folks behind me love to live here because they can have pets, they can have animals, they can have horses, they can have sheep, they can have goats, they can have chickens. Well, guess what happened to most of these animals? If these guys were not fortunate enough to have a friend or someone to help them quickly move them out, they're floating along with the septic with the water. They're disintegrating and decomposing right behind us. There's no way to get to them. There's horses, there's cows, there's you name it, they're out there floating around.
The Arroyo, Colorado remains one of the most contaminated waterways in our region. As of 2025, it continues to suffer from dangerously low oxygen levels, and the fish and shrimp caught here still carry the legacy of decades of pollution. Arsenic, chromium, selenium, and zinc have been found at levels exceeding safety criteria inside the muscle tissue of local fish and shrimp. These aren't just traces, these are toxic loads, well above acceptable guidelines, with documented pathological abnormalities in fish occurring more frequently here than in some of the most polluted waters of the Louisiana coast. And this contamination extends beyond the waterway. A recent study by Texas A&M University and Methodist Healthcare Ministries found arsenic in 100% of water samples taken from Colonia homes in Alamo and Progreso, Texas. Not just in the water, but in the bodies of residents, confirmed through urine, blood, and toenail biomarker tests. The water that sustains our communities is the same water that fills our rivers, and both are saturated with heavy metals and poisons we cannot see. This is not a distant threat. It's here, right now, in our homes, in our bodies, in the life flowing through the valley.
So you've got engineering failure of a flood, engineering failure of the sanitary sewer system. In a lot of cases, it inundates the water system and infiltrates it, and you gotta submit boil water notices to entities, so you got a water infrastructure failure. And then obviously you got a road transportation engineering failure because the roads are flooded.
I just figured, you know, the rain would pass. I'm there, it's around 6 o'clock at the office. I'm the only one left. And then my wife comes to pick up my son, who was helping us out that day. But in a way, I'm glad I kind of stuck around, because after the rains were coming down, I started hearing some noises from the closet. I go, hey, that's not normal to hear that. I go into the closet, multiple holes in the roof started developing. And luckily I was there to catch all that. We had a bunch of buckets, and we had the mop bucket, and we had a little wagon, you know, a plastic wagon there that we used to take out the trash. And it caught all the rain, you know. I dumped the bucket out twice before I left, and when there was a lull, that's when I said, I'm gonna escape, you know, I'm gonna get out of here while I still can. I just drive to Business 77. It was already dark, and it was just bumper to bumper, and I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe the level of water already at Business 77. And luckily our parking lot there at our strip mall where our office is located was not flooded yet, or hadn't been flooded. So I started taking pictures out there. And then again, I waited for a break in the traffic and went through, going down Old Helen Moore, which is Paso Real. I was kind of like, what's going on? It just didn't, your mind can't comprehend what's going on, because there's like, the cops are trying to, you know, we're all squeezed in the middle of the road. We weren't driving like normal because, you know, both sides, water was already coming out from both sides of the field, you know. Even my family couldn't comprehend it, because they're like, why didn't you just park in the hotel and wait? I go, you don't understand. You cannot get to the parking area of the hotel that was alongside that road, because it was inundated with water already, you know, and they just couldn't believe it, or they just looked at me very puzzled, like, why did that happen, you know? Going down to the turnaround, to the overpass of the expressway, again, people were, and police were giving them directions. There were about 3 or 4 cars deep in terms of lined up horizontally, just trying to escape the water. Those were the smaller vehicles. So yeah, under the underpass, you know, everybody was going up, realized what was going on. It was like flooding, so they went up on the overpass, up on the expressway. For some reason, I didn't go up on the expressway, even in my truck. I don't know what I was thinking. And right where the ramp is, if you're going on frontage, that's where the water hit me. You know, and you could still kind of smell the funk in here, and it started coming in to the sides and started moving the vehicle. And then my truck started going, you know, making that noise, that gurgling noise, that, you know, death of the vehicle noise. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna be stuck out here. And I saw myself like pictured on top of the roof, like, you know, asking for help or something like that, because it didn't seem like I was going anywhere. I was just literally treading water in my truck. And luckily it managed to get it to high ground. You know, I guess it made contact with the wheels made contact with the pavement, and I sped forward, and I was clear pretty much until I got to my house. And then again, as I turned, same thing happened again, you know, and I barely made it in. And then again, my block was already flooded. We're hardwired to survive, and we don't want to accept that, you know, Mother Nature's kind of fighting back, you know. In our lifetimes, we lived through the first of many, the 100-year storm. If you think about it, right? Remember that? That was a 100-year flood. You know, the 100-year freeze. I mean, these are like pecks on the cheek, you know what I'm saying? Because I think, and I've always told my family that, I go, just where we're at, you know, the fact that we're a valley, the fact that we're near water, the fact that we have the Rio Grande, we have these arroyos, I think it's a matter of time, you know? It's a matter of what, not or when, not so much what, you know. It's like we just got to try to be prepared. My daughter's boyfriend was working that night. We went to work, and that area of Harlingen, downtown Harlingen, got hit pretty hard. And again, it's one of the older areas of the valley, of the county. In terms of construction, and you could kind of just feel that it was, you know, you could kind of feel that when you go into downtown, you're going into a little bit lower lying area. And he got stuck there at work. He was advised to move his car to higher ground. When he went out there, that was it. He couldn't open his doors anymore. His car didn't work, and he was flooded in, and the water started quickly rising, and he became scared, you know, as anybody would. He started doing the SOS with his lights. He called my daughter kind of to say his goodbyes because he didn't know if he was going to make it or not.
I was in my car, parked there for about maybe an hour and a half before my girlfriend, she kept calling 911, and I told her not to because I knew there's people, they were just swamped, I'm sure, with phone calls saying, oh, we need to be rescued. And I'm pretty sure there were people in more dire situations than I was. So I wanted to, you know, let them worry about other people. But eventually I did get pretty scared to the point where I had to call 911. And I was on hold for maybe like 15 minutes before, you know, I just decided to hang up. As I'm driving down the street, I can hear my speakers start to go, right? My car, they're just crackling super loud. And I'm just freaking out. I tried turning down the volume all the way. That doesn't do anything. That's just still coming right through. I tried turning off the audio completely. That's still going. And I just ignore it because I'm just trying to focus on getting my car tire around. And I got an alert on my phone saying, okay, 9 o'clock, the rain should stop, hopefully. But 9 o'clock comes and I think I get an alert that's saying, oh, it's flood warning until 11 o'clock. And it just kept going and going. At that point, my girlfriend, she messaged her dad saying, oh, you need to go pick up Michael. Which I knew that wasn't a good idea. I told her right now, he's gonna get stuck. The water is, the streets are not navigable right now. So the parking lot where I was kind of inclined like that, I would say. And I was parked here, and I felt pretty safe for a while, but then slowly the rain just kept coming. I could hear thunder, it was lightning, it was pretty scary. And the water just kept rising and rising slowly. And at that point, I got really scared. There was a good part of me that thought I was gonna die at that part, but I just wanted to leave a note or something, so I left, you know, my name, the location where I was, just in case anything happened. Eventually, I did see a huge, massive truck I thought was rescue workers. So I flashed him, right, SOS, so ... And luckily he picked up on the signal, right? He saw me, and he was parked on the railroad tracks. And he came into the street, which I didn't think he was gonna clear it, but he did, luckily. And I thought it was a rescue vehicle at first, but it was just a Good Samaritan. And I climbed into his front seat, and we're driving through downtown, and I think he was on his way to pick up a couple buddies of his, and the streets are just completely flooded, and I see some of the businesses, they're already like sloshing with water. There's several cars that are up to the roof, and we're just running the red lights because at that point it didn't really matter. But we get to a gas station, we pick up his buddies, and we drop them off at their apartment. And as we're passing the expressway, you can see several cars just lined up, just trapped there in the floods. I don't think there were people in there. There might have been some people. There were definitely people under the expressway, just waiting there on top of their cars or standing. But it looked like something out of like The Walking Dead. It was crazy. My main question at the end is, why is this keep happening? This isn't the first time apparently that we've had floods in this area. But
I did a kind of like a study on the areas that would be most affected if we were to get another storm like this with a hurricane, like Hurricane Beulah.
mm-hmm.
And if it were at some point in Harlingen, not too far from here, it clocked it at 54 feet, which is 5.5, which is a little.
54 inches or?
54 feet.
54 feet.
So that's talking about you're covering homes at this point. So with that being said, if it were to even at that point happen at anywhere else in these areas, which is Brownsville, Harlingen, San Benito, and Green Valley Farms, the study was saying that it could possibly wipe out 100,000 people, which is 114 people here in the Rio Grande Valley. How does it make you feel?
I mean, that's scary to think about, really terrifying. I mean, a lot of us here in the Valley, we don't have anywhere else to go. We're one of the poorest communities in the country. And, it's just terrifying to think about.
Michael Marks survived the flood, but as he faced the rising water, he learned a chilling fact. The river near Harlingen had climbed to 54 feet, a level quietly recorded by the National Water Prediction Service, part of NOAA. A number buried in data, but too late to stop the rising tide. But 54 feet, it's hard to imagine. That's nearly 5.5 stories of water. Picture a building taller than 5 stories, and as the rain falls and the rivers rise, that entire building slowly fills with water. Floor by floor, window by window, until it's completely consumed. And all around it, the neighborhoods, the homes, the streets, they're swallowed too, disappearing beneath the rising flood, with no way to escape. Because even for those who escaped with their lives, the flood took more than just structures. It took the very work of their lives. For one woman in the valley, the rising waters destroyed half of her life's work. 30 years dedicated to autism research, and in a matter of hours, 15 years of discoveries, notes, and irreplaceable study materials were gone. The flood didn't just swallow homes, it drowned legacies. It erased decades of progress, swept away by the rising tide.
We've removed a lot of things already from the house. 30 years of autism research. That's what I love to work on studying autism, and I lost half of my things this time. I didn't get to them. As you see, the water was not so high, but because we have the berm. That's the only reason that the water did not get higher. Let me turn this up. The mold is already starting to grow. This is faster than I've seen it before. This is the fastest I've seen mold growing, and you can actually see it in different areas where it's already starting. This room it was hit pretty bad. I had to take off all the curtains. They're all on the floor. Everything was underwater. This room and the other room over there, the man cave that we call, were hit the worst. So you go up, it's about the same amount, just about everywhere. You can really see it on the doors right here. Our objective today is to see if we can salvage the cabinets. So I'm getting ready to disinfect, put fans. These cabinets are pretty pricey. So I'm hoping not to lose them. And this is a room right now that we have that's still underwater. This is the one I'm trying to pump out right now.
This is like the man cave?
This is the man cave, as you can tell. Yeah, so basically everything, it would be worse. It would be worse if we didn't have the berm and we didn't have some type of drainage going on here. We have our own drainage infrastructure here. It would be worse if we didn't have that. Right now, our home would be underwater still if we didn't have that. So that's the only reason that we can actually come in. It didn't take long to drain. My son and I put the pumps. The water went out right away. But getting in here was difficult. It was so flooded. And on Monday, I could see my driveway. And by Monday afternoon, my driveway was gone. And that's it. The driveway has been lifted. So this isn't a typical driveway height.
That's 4 days after.
Yes. And that's the norm here. That is what happens. That is why I don't care what anybody says. Logic, if we were going to flood, we would have flooded right away. And we never flood right away. We flood days after.
Interesting. So you seem like you're in good spirits with relatively everything that happened. But why?
Well, basically, I was deeply hurt in 2018. 2018 was the year of my shock. I seriously had an issue recovering. I couldn't even buy furniture. It took me about maybe 10 months afterwards for me to buy something. I was devastated, so devastated. And now, not that you get used to it, but that you accept it and you think of how fortunate we still are. Like I said, we have flood insurance. And I still think about the people that don't and how they're going to struggle. So I can't feel sorry for myself. I just can't. I am actually expecting a very, very bad outcome for this hurricane season. If our ground is this saturated right now, this is not going to get any better.
Very few people realize that the Arroyo, Colorado, a 90-mile stretch of water winding from Mission, Texas, all the way to the Laguna Madre, doesn't flow naturally at all. What once was a living artery of the Rio Grande has been choked off by human development and the unforgiving grip of a changing climate. But human development hasn't just stolen the river's flow, it has also laid a dangerous trap across the land itself. Because here in the valley, developers are allowed to carve neighborhoods into flood-prone land and sell them, without ever fully warning the families who will build their futures there. The law doesn't require developers to reveal the full truth about flood risks. If the land hasn't flooded yet, or if the dangers are hidden beneath outdated maps and incomplete records, they're under no obligation to say a word. And so they build homes on top of disaster zones, cash the checks, and leave the risk to everyone else. First-time buyers, young families, people chasing the dream of home ownership, sold a future built on a foundation of water and false promises. Because while the Arroyo, Colorado survives on streams of wastewater from our cities, runoff from our farms, and the polluted rain from our streets, it is the people living beside it who carry the real cost. Without these toxic flows, the river would run dry. But with them, it courses through our communities, dragging filth, poison, and floodwaters straight into the homes sold to unsuspecting families. And when the floods come, the people who bought these homes will learn the truth the hard way. Too late to escape, too late to be warned.
You know, the resiliency of people is phenomenal, but you know, how much can they take going on forever and ever? What can we do when right next to where we're at, we have a request for a new subdivision to be approved, that we have no legal ability as decision makers of the Cameron County Political Subdivision to deny that subdivision from being developed and from those lots from being sold. Zero. Property rights in the state of Texas, and rightfully so, are quite important. But I think human rights should be quite important too, because we know we cannot attach anything to that subdivision that says that it floods when it rains. It meets the minimum requirements that the state gives us. Our hands are tied. If we don't approve it, he can sue us for delay in his investment. The same way with the water company. They have lines that flow water, potable water by there. They cannot deny giving these folks a water meter to use in their homes, even though they know that when we have a rain event such as this, they're going to be underwater.
This isn't just water. It's not just a river or a flood. It's a warning, and it's been flowing through our lives long before we realized it. The Arroyo, Colorado runs through our neighborhoods, past our homes, and beneath our feet. And what runs through it now is not life, but the waste we've allowed to define our future. It carries high levels of arsenic, a silent poison tied to cancers and diabetes. In the Rio Grande Valley, diabetes rates soar above 30%, far higher than the national average. Arsenic doesn't just flow through our water, it flows through our blood. It carries high levels of chromium, scarring our lungs and kidneys. Here in the valley, respiratory illness is 20% higher than the rest of the nation, and kidney disease ranks among the leading causes of death. It carries high levels of selenium, a metal that, in excess, attacks the nervous system and causes birth defects. South Texas birth defect rates are up to 10% higher than the national average, silently shaping the future of our children. It carries toxic levels of zinc, weakening immune defenses and causing stomach distress. In the valley, immune-related illnesses and gastrointestinal infections surge after flooding as contaminated water seeps into our homes and soil. It carries concentrated pesticides, flooding in from our fields, raising cancer risks and increasing the risk of autism in our children before they ever take their first breath. In our farming communities, these dangers are real, and our children bear the cost. It carries deadly bacteria like Vibrio vulnificus, the flesh-eating bacteria, thriving in warm, stagnant floodwaters, waiting for the next open wound, the next victim. And after every storm, we've seen the infections rise. It carries poisonous algae blooms, choking our air, poisoning our lungs, fueling some of the highest asthma rates in the country, right here in South Texas. These aren't distant dangers. They're here, right now, in the water that floods our homes, the soil beneath our feet, and the air we breathe. And when the rains fall, when the Arroyo rises, they come for us all. Because here, in the Rio Grande Valley, the flood doesn't have to come from the coast. It's already here, in our streets, in our homes, in our blood. If we do nothing, if we turn away and hope for the best, the next time the skies open, the Arroyo, Colorado will not spare us. It will drown our future, just like it has drowned our past. This is not just a storm story. This is our story, our valley, our fight. And the water is already rising. What do you think happens to a community when its lifeblood is poison? When every storm doesn't just bring water, it brings sickness, it brings death, it brings loss that lingers long after the skies have cleared. This isn't just water, it's a warning. This is what happened before we drowned.
I hope somebody that can do something out there can hear this and help us. That's my hope. That's it.